Hey, thanks for joining again today. I'm so glad that you're back listening to the Leverage Your Podcast show. I'm your host, Lindsay Phillips. And for those of you that have heard my voice already before, welcome back. If you haven't and you're new, I'm excited to have you here, helping you get some tips on how to be a better guest, how to be a better host, and really get more strategic about your podcasting strategy. And we have the perfect guest today, April Adams Pertuis. She was actually in my podcast guesting Unsummit. Fabulous speaker. I've been on her podcast. You definitely have to go to lightbeamers.com to check her out. She's phenomenal. And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lindsay. So happy to be back with you to do some more podcast
I know,
discussions.
our favorite conversation.
Yeah.
And just so you know out there that April is amazingly skilled when it comes to storytelling and speaking on stage. And so I wanted to bring April on today to really talk about bringing your personality out and like what kind of speaker are you? What kind of guest are you going to be on podcast? Not that we want you to be someone that you're not, but there are certain styles and like we'll weave in some storytelling tips on just how to be a magnificent guest. And so, April, what would you say for just for you personally, because you have
Mhm.
your own podcast as well,
Mhm.
what for you makes a good guest?
Oh, such a good question. Um, First of all, I'll start with something kind of technical and practical that, I'm sure you've talked about a lot on the show, Lindsay, but it's not something that I think a lot of guests who if someone's being a guest and they aren't already hosting their own show, they probably wouldn't think of this. And it's really just your setup and your ability to kind of make sure everything is quiet, to be in a good room, to be in front of a good recording device, preferably not a phone, to have a good camera, to have a good microphone. That doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of money,
No.
but it does mean to really think about how this is going to look and sound. Not so much. I mean, yes, it's great for the host because, it makes their show look good when the guests can look good, but also for you because strategically, getting on a show, becoming a guest and being on a show is huge leverage. You
Yeah.
right? Leverage for you as a guest because now you can take these clips, these videos, these sound bites, and distribute them back over on your channels. And so it's added marketing and time and money or whatever that you invest on becoming a guest on a podcast, you're going to be able to leverage for your own marketing and your own visibility.
Yeah.
And so you want to look good. And that doesn't mean like, you don't have to be dressed to the nines. You don't have to have all your, you don't have to have your hair curled and all the things, but I mean, you do want to look the way you would want to represent your brand,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like for you. If
Yeah.
you're in sweats because you are a fitness person,
Right.
fine. That is all good. But you do want to make sure you have a good quality setup, good microphone. I just really appreciate that. I will tell you, I've been podcasting for 5 years.
Yeah.
I've had my show for 5 years, and a majority of our guests who are not
Right.
podcasters would never do this, show up using their computer mic and it does not
Oh,
sound good,
no.
right? So just those are the tactical practical.
Yeah.
Now there's the fun stuff,
Yeah.
which is really, I always say that you mentioned storytelling. So I always say this about storytelling when I'm teaching storytelling, but the same applies to podcasting because hopefully you're going to get on the podcast and, share more personal things. You're not just going to talk like a robot.
Yeah.
So the thing is about being a good guest is really knowing who that audience is. So
Hmm.
it's not so much knowing who your host is. I hope you do know that. And like I know you and I know what you're about, right? But I know who your audience is, Lindsay, because I understand what your show is about. So therefore, the things that I'll talk about today, I'm thinking about that first.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking about my answers in relationship to the person that's going to be listening to this. So as a good guest, you want to think that way too. So I always say the number one rule of storytelling is to know who your audience is. The number one rule of podcast guesting is to know who your audience is too.
That's a great point. It's like last night I was doing a mini workshop for a group of real estate investors. And so I, weaved in and used language that they would be familiar with
Yeah,
or gave examples that were for them, versus being generic across the board. Just as an example, I think that's
perfect example.
really smart. And I think it really makes you, the host, know that you care about their show and you care about their audience when you can tailor it to
Mhm.
their audience. So it's so worth doing that research.
Yeah. And it's not hard research, really. Just ask the host, tell me more about your audience. Tell me a little bit of like the host have data on the show. Like who
Yeah,
listens to your show? What are the things the big topics that you like to cover, that kind of thing. Gives them an
yeah,
idea gives you an idea of who the audience is.
for
And listen
sure.
to the show.
Oh, goodness
Listen to the
gracious.
show before
Yes.
you go on. Like I have been listening to your show, number one, because I really enjoy it. But also because I knew I was going to be a guest. I'm like, oh, let me just go see what she's been talking about lately,
Mm,
because then maybe it's fresh in my mind and I could be like, oh, like whatever we talk about today, I might be able to refer back to, another guest. I
yeah,
heard you
yeah.
say this with another guest. I mean, just again is it's layering and it's adding rich conversation when you can do
Hmm.
that.
Ooh, that's a good phrase, layering. I love that.
Hmm.
Now, I know you have a quiz and we'll share this at the end, but you talk about your authentic speaker style.
Hmm.
And I would love for you to explain that to me because yes, you want to be yourself. So, yeah, just unpack that so we can kind of make sense of it.
Yeah, it's really thinking of it as I like to call them like archetypes
Hmm.
because our personality types, like we all have
Okay.
different ways that we like to communicate.
Yeah.
And we have different communication styles, and that's the ones that we use are the ones that are most authentic to us. Um, I like to call this your superpower, especially on a stage. When you know this in advance about yourself, then you know kind of how to lean into the things that you're really, really good at when
Hmm.
you're speaking or when you're being a guest on a show, right? So there are what I've identified, and I'm not saying this is a one and only list, but I've been doing this work for a really long time when it
Yeah.
comes to storytelling and speaking. And I've been in the media for a long time. So, certainly broadcasting and all that kind of stuff. And so, kind of thinking back through the years and kind of assessing it, I came up with four different archetypes, if you
Okay.
will, of the way that people tend to show up in their communication style, especially when they're presenting or they're getting the spotlight on them, right? Or you're speaking in some manner. And so um, there are four types, and I'll kind of go through them quickly, and then I'll kind of break them
Perfect.
down each one in a little bit. And yes, we have a quiz that everyone can take to really dive in even deeper and find out for sure which one
Yeah.
you think
Yeah.
you are. So they are visionary, authentic, strategic, and empathetic. Okay, so I'm going to start with each one. And just
Okay.
even as I'm sharing this, the listener, I would invite the listener to just kind of think through this. And,
Yeah.
you might be thinking, oh, that one sounds a little bit more like me. And again, the quiz that we can drive everyone to will take them through a little bit more of an in-depth questionnaire and then we give them the results at the end.
Perfect.
I also would say that you might also tend to hear more than one category that you think you might fit into, and that is often the case. But you'll tend to lean heavier on one or the other, even though
Yeah.
you might carry attributes of both. Okay, so let's start with visionary. The visionary communicator, the visionary speaker, the visionary guest is someone that really loves to communicate by telling and sharing big ideas, right? It's a
Mm,
big thinker, a forward thinker for sure, someone who is almost ahead of their time, often thinking and dreaming about concepts and talking about concepts that are haven't really been discussed a lot yet.
Right.
And so our storytelling style, if you're a visionary thinker, is almost telling stories that are like imagine, it's like imagine if kind of
Yeah,
stories,
yeah.
it's like fairy tale stories, right? Or um, stories that we're laughing about these days because it's like we're seeing so many stories come true in our world that when we were kids, we could not even imagine.
No.
I'm thinking of like the stories of like the Jetsons. I watched the cartoon The Jetsons when I was
Yeah.
growing up. I'm telling my age. But now I feel like we're actually in the realm of having the technology to where
Mm,
we that Jetsons is no longer a fairy tale. So when you're telling the story of like, imagine if we could get on a spaceship and travel through time, right? That's like what the Jetsons were doing back in the day. So
yeah.
you're imagining, you're kind of telling the story and you're painting a picture. You're a big visionary type person. So that's one is the
Okay.
visionary. Do you have any questions about that one before I
Yeah.
move
Do you
on?
find that that kind of person, like their goal is to change people's
Yes.
perspectives or open up their eyes to possibilities? Like, I feel like there's a slightly different motivation
Yes. And it's
behind
just
that type.
it's inherently motivated, right? Like to them, this is what matters to them
Right.
is that they want to change the conversation. They want to open people's eyes. They don't even like really necessarily consciously are going in and going, oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna make sure I open their eyes,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they are naturally inclined. Again, this is, your superpower, your particular strength.
Yeah.
And so, many of us can have visionary capabilities, like to
Yeah.
dream big and to think big. But if you really lean into this communication style, you will notice that this is the way you like to present. These are the types of stories you like to tell.
Yeah.
This is the way you like to communicate. So, therefore, this is a strength of yours, and it's just something to be aware of. It's
Yeah.
really a great skill to have because these visionary people are going to be big motivators and
Hmm.
they're going to be very inspiring with their ideas. Um, they also kind of typically do like to kind of rattle the cage a little bit, to get people thinking
Yeah. Yeah.
differently. So they are sometimes, they kind of have an agenda behind the scenes and not saying that's bad
Yeah.
at
Not
all,
at all.
but they have, like you said,
Yeah.
they have a motivation for what they're doing.
And it totally changes the way you would on a podcast talk about what it is that you do, or if you're on stage. So it is interesting to me how your style and like what motivates you as well changes how the conversation goes on, and also
Mhm.
what the listener, their experience and what they take away from it.
Yeah,
And
it
I
will
just, yeah, it's super
definitely
interesting.
impact the audience for sure, which is why it's important to know
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things, right? Because I just told you earlier, the most important
Yeah,
thing is to know your audience and kind of understand them. So understanding that this will impact them in a particular way is important to know as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Okay, so
Great.
visionary, that
Next,
was
yep.
visionary. The next one is we'll go with authentic. Authentic is these are our storytellers. These are the ones that just really have such a genuine, oozy goozy ability to just 100% be themselves. And you don't feel any pretense about them whatsoever. And they love to tell stories. They
Yeah.
love to communicate through telling the story. And so, I work in storytelling. I thrive in this authentic space. This
Yep.
was my natural communication style, which is why I went into storytelling as a
Totally.
business. It just this felt so natural to me. I ended up, literally making it my career. But as I'm on shows and as I am, on stages, I'm just always usually telling a story, just communicating by way of telling about an experience that I
Yeah.
had or, you know, describing something in more detail. So I really love to layer in those stories. So anybody that loves to tell stories, that feels very natural in front of people, talking and speaking just does not scare them at all. Not to say that, there's not opportunities that you might have that won't make you nervous, but like
Yeah.
you just feel really in the saddle speaking in front of people and being on shows. And it doesn't phase you. It's not about the limelight to you. It's just about connection with people and
Mm,
getting to share stories. So that's an authentic storyteller. They're going to feel really, really comfortable in that space. And they're going to spend a lot of time telling stories
yeah.
versus, casting big visions necessarily like our visionary friends will do.
Yeah. That's awesome. I have a
Yeah.
question for you at the end, but I want to hear the other two first.
Okay. All right. We'll go to strategic next. Strategic communicators and strategic speakers are going to be people who tend to lean more left brain and they like to think in concrete data, in kind of absolute terms, that kind of thing. So, strategic thinkers are going to be well researched. They're going to come to the table with great information, data, statistics, if you will, even.
Mhm.
And they're just going to know that stuff. Again, this comes natural to them, right?
Right.
They've already been reading, and so they take in this information. They don't have to work extra hard at it. It's very natural. This is part of your authentic style, right? So if you're a strategic thinker and a strategic communicator, this comes very natural to you. You're automatically doing the research anyway. You're not having to do extra work and you're able to obtain that information and then regurgitate it very easily when you're speaking with people. Like you just remember these stats and data
Yeah. I
and
don't know how people do that.
right. Well, typically, if you're an authentic or authentic
Yeah.
speaker like I am, tell a lot of stories. I'm not so good at remembering the data. Okay. So you're going to start to also see where some people might cross over. You're
Yeah.
also going to see where some people might be polar opposite, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
So for mine too. Like I am more authentic, so definitely I'm not very strategic at all. Here's a tidbit about that though. Once you start to identify where you lean
Hmm.
easily, it will also be good information for you to know. And this is an area where you might want
Right.
to focus and bring to the table because it's not where you naturally lean. So, if I knew I was going to be giving a talk or I was going to be on someone's podcast about a particular topic, and I knew that I got the storytelling thing down, but I might want to go and do a little extra homework and dig up some research and dig up some data. I would not be able to recall it naturally, so I would probably write it down and have it on
Yeah,
a note card in front of me.
totally.
I could be prepared that way, right? But we're focusing on what is your authentic style. So
Hmm.
again, if you're strategic, this is going to be more authentic and easy for you.
So would you say those types lean towards like educating
Yes.
and like facts
Facts.
and,
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
yeah.
Presentations. They love a slide deck. They they like graphs and pie charts. I
Yeah,
mean, we like the visuals that show the data. They are going to lean towards those facts. They are not they are not swayed a lot by, I mean, everyone is responds well to stories. That's why
yeah,
storytelling works, but they're not going to lean so heavily on it. They're going to lean more heavily on research and facts and datas. And someone who is strategic is going to be someone I would advise, okay, we really do need to work on your
right.
storytelling and make sure you're not leaving that off the table because it is super important in terms of communication in general. Every single one of these categories, and I'll get to empathetic next, every single one of these categories has a need for storytelling. It's just the way
Agreed.
you approach it is a little bit different, right?
Agreed.
So yeah, 100%. You definitely are going to see, that those kinds of different differences with each one. Okay, our last one is empathetic. And a lot of people will often get empathetic and authentic confused.
Okay.
And so you, as I say this, you might be think, oh, I thought I was authentic, but now maybe I think I'm empathetic. Or visionary sometimes will cross over here too. This is why I think the quiz will be really helpful so you can kind of take the
Agreed.
questions and determine for yourself. But an empathetic person is someone who they're going to come to the table prepared. They're going to, they're going to be willing to tell the stories. They might even have a little bit of that research stuff done and all that kind of good stuff. And they're really tapped into their intuition. They are really tapped, and it's so important to them to be there, to be in that intuitive state that they're really, really good at reading the room. And
Mm,
they're really good at vibing off the energy with the host of the podcast,
yeah.
right? And so in that case, because typically in podcast, it really is just a conversation between you and the host, and it's not a room full of people. This will
Right.
work. Obviously, it works the same if you're in a room full of people, right? If you're out there speaking at a live audience or something like that, you're going to be able to read the room of the crowd.
Yeah, yeah.
But in a podcast situation, you might be reading the energy from the actual host. And good or bad, you might
Yep.
be feeling like the host isn't really liking what I'm saying, or they're not getting it, like, without the host telling you.
Yeah.
You will be able to sense if the host is trying to guide the conversation a different way, and you will be able to pick up on that and read that room, and you will be able to switch gears so easily it will not
Nice.
even phase you.
Yeah.
Right? Now, some people that phases them when they feel like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, it's
yeah.
not landing. Oh my gosh, I'm not doing a good job. And then they struggle from there.
Yeah.
Our empathetic communicators do not struggle with this. They can go in and they can have a plan, and then they ditch the plan and they go to plan B, they go to plan C, they go to plan Z. Nothing phases them. They can think on their feet. They are
Nice.
very quick to adapt, and it's all based on their intuitive gut feeling. And
Interesting.
so that is hard to teach,
Yeah.
right? That is something that people are gifted in. And so, if you know that about yourself, this is really good information because
Yeah.
sometimes people will. I've known speakers like this. They'll make their plan, they'll practice their talk, they'll walk into the conference, and they'll get on the stage and they'll kind of pause for a second, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna share with you what I was planning on sharing with you today, and
I
I'm
can't
gonna
fathom
go
that.
in a completely different direction." And they do, and they totally
What?
kill it. And they've
Wow.
not practiced that talk. They
What?
have not planned it, but they
Dang.
literally can pull it out from their their guts,
Yeah. Oh my
literally,
gosh.
and totally pull it off. And it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch people
Yeah.
do that. I have a dash of empathetic. I have a strong empathetic side of me. I'm very tapped into my intuition. I don't thrive on completely changing my plan last minute like
Yeah,
that. So
yeah.
I'm definitely an authentic communicator first and foremost, but I have this touch of empathetic. I have been on stages before in podcast interviews like this where I wasn't planning on telling a certain story, and I will kind of hear it come in. And it'd be like, tell that story, tell that story. That's what is needed.
Mm.
And I'm like, really? Like that story? Okay. And then I go with it. I've learned to go with it. I've learned to
Yeah.
not question that anymore.
There's a reason
I've
why
learned
you're
to,
feeling that way.
there's a reason why you're feeling that. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So
So,
I find this so fascinating because I'm thinking like I'm picturing all these different scenarios. So like when you're a guest, sometimes if you don't have a pre-chat and you go in and you don't feel that initial vibe, it can throw you off.
it really
And
can.
so, yeah, and so maybe that pre-chat will help you like if you don't have that intuitive or empathetic side to you, maybe that would help create that energy and you feel more comfortable when you go into the actual recording. Yeah, I'm just thinking of like different ways that you can know, like you said, know where your weaknesses are and
Hmm.
how you can alter the situation or your skills to really connect with the host and the audience.
Well, and that's exactly it. Because if you think about it, the way you're communicating is what's natural to you, and it
Hmm.
will automatically resonate with a cross section of the audience that's out there that's
Yeah.
listening, right? Let's just cut our audience in a pie chart, and it's a fourth, right? We've got four speaker styles, so there's a fourth of the audience. If you are an authentic speaker like I am, then the fourth of the audience is really going to really love all those stories and the way
Yeah.
that you are just so casual and comfortable and easygoing and all that kind of stuff. But remember, there are also going to be people in the audience that are strategic thinkers.
Right.
And so they're going to want that kind of that framework, like I'm giving you
Hmm.
a framework today. This is
Yes.
very strategic of me, by the way, right, to develop this quiz and to put this into nice little quadrants
Yes.
that have labels, that have
Yes.
definitions, right? So this is me leaning into my strategic side. This is not my strength. But again, I know this about myself. So I've learned to build these things out so that I can bring them to the table. And I know that I'm going to reach a section of the audience that loves these types of, black and white kind of frameworks
Hmm.
and models, right?
Yeah.
So same is true for visionary and casting big pictures. I mean, these are all things that we can practice once you know if you don't have that strong suit there, but just
Hmm.
remembering that people in the audience do. And the more you can tap into it a little bit, I'm not saying you're spending your whole interview
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
but you can tap into it a little bit, the better chances you have of reaching everyone in that audience and that audience receiving something from you that they could really sink their teeth into.
Yeah. Oh, that's such good stuff. And like for me, when I listen to podcasts, I want the nuts and bolts. I want the
Yeah.
tips. I want the three things. And I'm like, stop chatting about all the other stuff. But that's
Yes.
me. But it makes you think about just like there's different people that are listening. So as we're talking, I'm kind of thinking about, how I guest on shows and I'm like, "Ooh, maybe I should weave in, oh, imagine if you're a guest and this happens." Or,
Yes.
again, it could be just a few sentences. It doesn't have to take up the whole, podcast, but what can I say differently that is connecting with those types of people that are listening?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Once you
amazing.
have this, it does help you. You're like, oh, I'm not really, I don't really think in visionary terms, but then maybe I could get my audience to kind of, think outside the
Mhm.
box and think bigger. And I can cast these bigger visions, or I can, yes, use that imagine story, right? Kind
Yeah.
of walk them through that and throw that out there. So it does help them if they are
Yeah.
more someone who is a visionary communicator.
Yeah, I love that. Well,
It
I
takes
don't wanna.
practice.
Yes,
I will say that.
100%.
I know when I first started podcasting, I was a one track mind, right? Like when I started my show, which was really when I started getting on other people's shows as well,
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, I want to go. I'll just be an open book. Yeah, I'll talk about whatever they want to talk about, within my realm of expertise. But I didn't have a lot of things planned and prepared. I wasn't someone that was super strategic at all. I didn't have fancy frameworks or anything like that to offer up, and I just relied heavily on my ability to talk with ease and to tell stories and to, kind of paint pictures that way. But as I've been doing this, I have picked up from guests that I have had, right?
Oh,
And I'm like, oh, I
nice.
love how they did that. And it's
Yeah.
informed me too. And like I said, just being in the industry for a long time, it made me kind of look around and want to build a framework that made sense for people. And that's kind of where this came from. But and several other frameworks that I have now, but a lot of it has been learned from just sitting in the chair and interviewing people and also
Mhm.
being a guest on shows and noticing where I had room to grow and noticing where I
Yeah,
had some strengths that I could work on.
100%. Yeah, I remember when I first started guesting, it was all about the tips and facts, and it's like everyone's, you got to weave in stories. I'm like, I just don't get it. I have no stories to tell. Thankfully, I've gotten better over the
Yeah.
years. So I don't, because you are the master of storytelling, I don't want to leave this episode without a few tips for the audience on how to weave that storytelling into their interviews. Because for if anyone else was out there like me, I just couldn't wrap my head around it.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be harder for people too if the like Lindsay and you are kind of like this because I can tell you lean a little bit more strategic because like you said, these are the things that you enjoy. You want the nuts and bolts. Give me the facts. Like I want to learn. I want just get straight to the good stuff. Don't mess around with all those stories, right? And that's cool. That's how some people are. That's why
Yeah.
we need to know this, right? Um, so someone like you, your interview style is going to lean that way, right? Just naturally.
True.
And so that means you may not ask a lot of questions that are going uh, to give the opportunity for the person to naturally just start telling their stories, right?
Yeah.
And so as a result, if that's not happening, if you're a guest and you are wanting to weave in more stories and you aren't getting the opportunity because the person's not point blank asking you about your story,
Yeah.
then you need to then think as you're answering and giving that response, is there an example I could give? Is there a time
Yes.
in my life where I've walked this journey? Can I just throw a story in here even though you weren't asked for one, right? So that's one thing as you're guesting on shows is because remember, even someone like you've said, you've had to work on bringing your stories to the forefront because stories matter. They are important.
Hmm.
They are a way that our
Absolutely.
audience connects to what we're trying to say. So while we're really interested, you are really interested in the facts and the learning, the story may help you concrete that in your head even more when you learn the facts because you've heard it wrapped up in a story.
Yeah.
Because we know from neuroscience, our brains do like the stories that they help us learn what we're being taught or what we're hearing from other people. And it's a way that we remember it later. Right. So the stories do help. So we don't want to abandon the ship of not telling the stories, even if on an interview where we're not like point blank being asked to tell the
Yeah.
story. So
Great
that's an
point.
important thing to point out first and foremost.
That is an absolutely great point because, and I actually don't ask people for stories because I feel like I never want to put them on the spot. Oh, can you tell me a time when that happened? And they're like, like I try to avoid that. But as a guest, I think like you said, it's an important skill to think about some stories ahead of time and then how to weave that in as examples.
Yeah.
I think that's super smart.
Yeah. And a fun exercise. I mean, we should all be out there listening to podcasts anyway, because we want to be on podcast.
Yes.
And you maybe even launch your own show if you don't have one yet. So, a really good place to spend some time is listening to other people's shows, listening to Lindsay's show, right? Which they already do. Come listen to my show. Find some
Yeah.
other shows that you don't even know about yet. And just take you know, this quiz, or take the four quadrants that I've given you today and just listen and try to guess after you've listened to a show. Hmm, I think the host is probably
Mm.
authentic or maybe they're visionary. And the guest seemed very strategic to me, So it might be fun to just kind of
Absolutely.
listen and start to see how other people do it and use it as kind of a tool to see if you can guess which is their strength in terms of communication.
Yeah.
And then once you hear it through other people, then you might remember some of these things that help you start to practice it when you're given the opportunity to share.
Yeah. Absolutely. So many angles you can use that. Like you don't realize it. And
I think it's just really good information to know what is our
yeah.
communication style because communication is like one of the top
Yeah.
skills that a lot of us just don't have, right?
Mhm.
again, this is why I will never run out of business because I teach communication to a large degree. So because people don't, that's an area that people struggle.
Yeah.
But just because you struggle with communication doesn't mean you don't have a strength in
Yeah,
communication.
yeah.
So it's so validating for people to kind of go through our quiz and answer these questions and then go, oh, that is so me, you know?
Yeah,
And it helps them realize that you don't necessarily suck at communication.
right.
You just have a strength in one area, but there's other areas that you now know you could develop. And that's an opportunity for you to just practice and work on it. And
Yeah.
so, I don't know that I'm ever going to be a strategic communicator. I did not bring any research with me today, and I don't have any data to give you because it's just not something that I spend a lot of time doing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I didn't feel like it was needed. And I don't
No.
often find like
Agreed.
it's needed for the things that I talk about. So, but I did bring a little strategic into it with the framework
Framework.
that I
Yeah.
brought you today. But that's okay. Like I
Yeah.
understand that about myself. And I also
100%.
understand that I'm going to make up for it in other areas. So,
I
but
know.
it
We
is
can't be
so
everything.
helpful. We can't be everything. That's right. But it is just so helpful, I find, to know. And then it also makes, especially if our listeners haven't been on a lot of shows. I just was talking with a client of mine right before I did the interview with you today, and she was telling me about an a live YouTube interview she was going to be on, I think tomorrow actually.
Mm.
And she was telling me that she was so nervous. And I
Oh,
was like, why? Like, she's a podcaster, she's had her own show. I was like,
yeah.
it's just like being on a podcast. And she's like, but it's live, you know? And I'm
Getting
like,
hung up
well,
on that.
okay.
Yeah.
So we're always going to have things that we might trip us up, but it's just remembering that you do have a skill, you have a way of being. Lean into that in the moments where things might be a little scary or unusual. So for anyone out there that's just getting into podcast guesting, you might feel a little uncomfortable, right? You might be a little nervous with certain things.
Yep.
But if you know that you can walk in with a strength that you already have, that's going to be pretty comforting to you.
Yeah, that's true.
And you are going to shine. It's going
Yeah.
to allow the best parts of you to shine during the interview.
Yeah, I imagine understanding that and knowing your style, it's a little freeing, but also gives
Yes.
you that sense of confidence that,
Yeah,
okay, I'm this type, I have these skills, lean into that, and yeah, I don't have to be everything. So how do
exactly.
people find the quiz? And also I would love for you to share your podcast to make sure that people can listen.
Okay, yes. The quiz is on our website. It's free, so you can take the quiz for free. We just have it built into our website to make it easy.
Yep,
And you go to lightbeamers.com/quiz. Very
that's
easy.
easy.
And then you can link it up if you like. Um, and so it'll just take you through a series of questions. It'll give you the result. And then from that, we have an email sequence that we've written for you, depending on the type of storyteller that you end up being.
Perfect.
Sorry, I knew I was going to let that one out. So that email sequence will also give you a few more tips. So
Yep,
you can watch for our emails to
perfect.
come after that, giving you some suggestions about, your presentation skills, your speaking, all that kind of stuff. So you can be on the lookout for that and take that quiz. And then our podcast is called The Inside Story with April Adams Pertuis. And our podcast focuses a lot on helping people understand the value of storytelling and how to use it, and also gaining visibility with it. So I'm a
Mm,
visibility strategist. I help
yeah,
my clients get more visible using their story. So we talk a lot about speaking on stages, podcasting, writing, particularly writing books. So we are looking to help our clients get more visible using their story. And there's obviously a lot of ways to do that with the avenues that I just mentioned. So our
Yeah.
podcast dives a lot deeper into those different strategies, different thoughts, trains of thought, different examples. We do interview amazing people who are out there doing really cool stuff with their story and kind of overcoming some of those hurdles. And so I like to use them as examples for our audience, and they can be very inspiring to listen to.
Yeah. What a great
So we're
resource.
not a very it's not a podcast that's a lot about like just like marketing and
Yeah,
business,
yeah.
but it is a business podcast that helps you think more strategically about your story.
I love it. That's perfect.
Yeah.
And of course, I was a guest on it, so
Yes,
it was awesome.
absolutely.
It
Very
was so
recent
good.
guest. So they've got to go check it
Yeah.
out.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks so much for joining me. I've loved this conversation. It was so juicy.
Oh, good.
And
I'm so glad.
yeah, I want to make sure people go to lightbeamers.com/quiz, and I'll obviously put the links in the notes and all that good stuff. And if you're on any of the podcast apps or YouTube, I would love for you to put in the comments what your type is after you do the
Yes,
quiz. I think that
I
would be
would love
super
to know
fun.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I already know which one I am. I am strategic.
Yes,
With
you
the
are.
I know.
But it'll be fun for you to take the quiz
Yeah.
and just see the questions that it asks you.
Hmm.
Even the questions can be kind of clarifying. But I think you're right. I think you're going to be strategic, but
Have a
you
hint of a
might,
couple other things.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Awesome. All right. I appreciate you so much. And thank
Thank you,
you.
Lindsay.
Thank you, audience, for joining us for another week. And I'll see you in a couple weeks on another episode of the Leverage Your Podcast Show. Take care.